We are back with part 4 of the reading of the Messianic Jewish Family Bible Tree of Life Version, TLV, and we are in the book of Leviticus, and we have begun chapter 4, so I'm going to pick up where we left off at the end of part 3. We're going to talk about when a ruler sins now. When a ruler sins and unwittingly does one of the mitzvot of Adonai, his God, that are not to be done, then he is guilty. This is the unintentional sin, by the way. When his sin that is committed is made known to him, when he becomes aware that he did something he shouldn't have, because he might not have been aware that, when he was doing it. That's why it's an unintentional sin. And now it's become, it's become known to him. Sorry, I had to pause it for a second. I am losing my voice tonight here. So when his sin that he committed is made known to him, he is to bring as his offering a goat, a male without blemish. He is to lay his hand on the head of the goat and slaughter it in the place where they slaughter the burnt offering before Adonai. It is a sin offering. The Kohen should take some of the blood of the sin offering with his finger and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering. He is to pour out the rest of the blood at the base of the altar of burnt offering. He is to burn all its fat on the altar, just like the fat of the sacrifice of fellowship offering. So the Kohen shall make atonement for him concerning his sin, and he will be forgiven. When any one of the common people sins unwittingly by doing one of Adonai's mitzvot that are not to be done, then he is guilty. When his sin that he has committed is made known to him, then he is to bring for his offering a goat, a female without blemish, for his sin that he committed. He is to lay his hand on the head of the sin offering and then slaughter it at the place of the burnt offering. The Kohen is to take some of the blood with his finger and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering. He is to pour out the rest of the blood at the base of the altar. He is to take away all of its fat, just like the fat is taken away from off the sacrifice of fellowship offerings. And the Kohen should burn it on the altar for soothing aroma to Adonai. So the Kohen is to make atonement for him, and he will be forgiven. And there are sin offerings as well, as the end of this chapter. Now, if he brings a lamb as his sacrifice for a sin offering, he is to bring a female without blemish. He is to lay his hand on the head of the sin offering and slaughter it at the place where they slaughter the burnt offering. The Kohen should take some of the blood of the sin offering with his finger and put it on the horns of the altar of the burnt offering. Then all the rest of its blood he is to pour out at the base of the altar. He must remove all its fat, just as the fat of the lamb is taken away from the sacrifice of fellowship offerings. Then the Kohen is to burn them on the altar on Adonai's offerings by fire. So the Kohen shall make atonement for him over the sin that he committed, and he will be forgiven. Okay, to recap the sin offering that we just read in chapter 4, the sin offering paid the debt in full for the children of Israel of unintentional sins, weaknesses, and failures before the Lord. The Lord told Moses to tell the children of Israel that if a soul sinned through ignorance, meaning unintentionally, against the Lord's commandments, the mitzvot, in anything they ought not to do, and if the priest that is anointed sins according to the sins of the people, then let him bring for his sin offering, which he had both sinned, a young bull without blemish unto the Lord for sin offering. And he shall bring the bull unto the door of the tabernacle of congregation before the Lord, and shall lay his hand upon the bull's head, and kill the bull before the Lord. The blood of the bull was to be taken by the priest to the tabernacle of congregation, and the priest is to dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle the blood 7 times before the Lord, before the veil of the sanctuary. Some of the blood was also put on the horns of the altar of sweet incense before the Lord, which is in the tabernacle of congregation. The fat was burned, kidney, liver, and entrails. Skin and fat were taken out of the camp, and the remainder was burned and never eaten. Even the whole bull shall he carry forth without the camp unto a clean place, where the ashes are poured out, and burn him on the wood with fire. When the ashes are poured out, that's where the remainder of the bull was burnt. If the whole congregation of Israel sinned through ignorance, again there was a procedure done with the bull. And when a ruler sinned through ignorance, if the sin comes to his knowledge, a kid of the goats, male without blemish, was to be offered up, and the blood was taken by the priest's finger and put on the horn of the altar, and then the blood was poured at the bottom of the altar of burnt offering. The fat was burned the same way as the peace offering. The priest was to make an atonement for the sin, and it shall be forgiven. Sins of the common people through ignorance, or if the sin is known to the person, a kid of the goats, female without blemish, was brought, and the same steps are taken as with the rulers. If a lamb is brought for a sin offering, it was female and without blemish. Sins of the common Israelites required female animals, goats, lambs, turtle doves, or pigeons, and in the case of the very poor, an offering of grain was acceptable, just like a meal offering. Each class of people had various ordinances to perform. Unintentional sins were difficult to identify and could happen at any time, and therefore the priests worked closely as mediators with God and the people, and were there to instruct the people as they sought the Lord. In any case, in cases any sins were not brought before the Lord, there were offerings for the nations and for the high priest, which covered them all in a collective way. On the Day of Atonement, which is known as Yom Kippur, the high priest sprinkled blood on the mercy seat for his own sins and the sins of the nation. The purpose of this offering that we're talking about, the unintentional sins, it was to atone for sins. With this sacrificial system, the offering covered sin, as I mentioned before, but it never removed it. It never took it completely away. Yeshua's sacrifice of his life did just that. It took away the sin completely. This is a non-sweet savor offering. This special feature of this offering is in the whole bull being burned upon the ground outside the camp of Israel after the blood and fat were put on the altar for God. The offering was sin made for us. In 2 Corinthians 5, verse 20 states, For he has made him to be sin for us who knew no sin, that we might be made the righteousness of God in him. Yeshua endured the judgment and the wrath of God against sin in our stead as our substitute. The holiness of God and the awfulness of sin are brought out in the bull being entirely burned outside the camp. It pictures Yeshua as being forsaken of God as our sin bearer. And Psalm 22 actually is a good, and Mark's gospel shows this. 2 Corinthians 5:21 shows Yeshua as our sin bearer, as he was made to be sin for us. So that is a recap of chapter 4. Now, I'm going to read through chapters 5, 6, and 7, and then I'll do a recap of the trespass offering, because it's actually stretched out in places in these 3 chapters. If a soul sins after hearing a charge of an oath, and he is witness, whether he has seen or otherwise known, if he fails to report it, then he will bear his guilt. Or if a person touches any unclean thing, whether it is the carcass of an unclean animal, or the carcass of unclean livestock, or the carcass of unclean creeping things, though it is hidden from him, still he is unclean, and he will be guilty. Or if he touches some human uncleanness, whether his filth is by which he is unclean, though it is hidden from him, when he knows it, then he will be guilty. Or if a person swears rashly with his lips to do evil or to do good about anything that one might utterly rashly by an oath, though it hidden from him, when he realizes it, he will be guilty of one of these. So it will be when one becomes guilty of one of these things, he should confess about what he sinned. Then he is to bring the trespass offering to Adonai. For his sin that he committed, a female from the flock, a lamb or a goat as a sin offering, so the Kohen is to make atonement for him over his sin. But if one cannot afford a lamb, then he should bring as his trespass offering for the sin he committed 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons to Adonai. One is for sin offering and the other is for burnt offering. He is to bring them to the Kohen, who will present they will present the one for the sin offering first, and twist his head from its neck, but not sever it completely. He is to sprinkle some of the blood of the sin offering on the side of the altar, while the rest of the blood is to be drained out of the base of the altar. It is a sin offering. He is to make the second a burnt offering according to the regulation. So the Kohen is to make atonement for one over his sin that he committed, and he will be forgiven. But if one cannot afford 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, then he is to bring as his offering for the sin he has committed a tenth of an ephah of fine flour as a sin offering. He is to put no oil on it, nor put any frankincense on it, for it is a sin offering. He is to bring it to the Kohen, and the Kohen is to take his handful of it as the memorial portion and burn it up as smoke on the altar on Adonai's offering by fire. It is a sin offering. The Kohen is to make atonement for him over his sin that one has committed in any of these things, and he will be forgiven. The rest belongs to the Kohen, just like the meal offering. Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, if anyone commits a faithless act and sins unwittingly against the holy things of Adonai, then he is to bring his trespass offering to Adonai, a ram without blemish from the flock, according to your value in silver shekels, after the shekel of sanctuary for a trespass offering. He is to make restitution for that which he has done wrong in regard to the holy thing, and is required to add a fifth part to it and give it to the Kohen. So the Kohen will make atonement for him with the ram of the trespass offering, and he will be forgiven. Now, if anyone sins and one of Adonai's commandments that are not to be done, though he did not know it, he's still guilty and will bear his iniquity. He is to bring to the Kohen a ram without blemish from one of the flock according to your value as a trespass offering. Then the Kohen is to make atonement for him over the sin that he committed unknowingly, and he will be forgiven. It is a trespass offering. He is absolutely guilty before Adonai. Now, the mitzvot of restitution, the commandment of restitution, is the last part of chapter 5. Then Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, suppose anyone sins and commits a faithless act against Adonai by dealing falsely with his neighbor in a matter of deposit or a pledge of hands, or through robbery, or has extorted from his neighbor, or has found what was lost and lied about it, swearing falsely, so sinning in one of any of these things that a man may do. Then it will be, when he has sinned and has become guilty, that he must restore what he took by robbery, or what he got by extortion, or the deposit that was committed to him, or what was lost that he found, or anything about which he has sworn falsely. He is to restore it in full and add a fifth part more to it. He must give it to the one to whom it belongs on the day of presenting his trespass offering. He is to bring his trespass offering to Adonai, a ram without blemish from the flock, according to your value, for a trespass offering to the Kohen. The Kohen shall make atonement for him before Adonai, and he will be forgiven. concerning whatever he may have done to become guilty. And that is the end of chapter 5. Now we're going to continue on, and chapter 6 starts Parashat Tzav, Tzav. Torah of burnt offering. Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, Command Aaron and his sons, saying, This is the Torah of the burnt offering. The burnt offering should remain on the hearth atop the altar all night until morning, while the fire of the altar is kept burning on it. The Kohen is to put on his linen garment with his linen undergarments on his body. He is to remove the fat ashes from where the fire has consumed the burnt offering on the altar and put them beside the altar. Then he is to take off his garments, put on other ones, and carry the ashes outside the camp to a clean place. The fire on the altar is to be kept burning on it. It must not go out. Each morning the Kohen is to burn wood on it, laying the burnt offering in order upon it, and burning up the smoke, the fat of the fellowship offerings. Fire is to be kept burning on the altar continually. It must not go out. Now I'm going to pause here, and we're going to come back with the next section of chapter 6, and that's entitled Torah of Grain Offering.